So I've been playing Star Citizen for about 4 months now as my main game, and I feel at this point I've gained enough experience to give an unbiased and open insight as a former Elite Dangerous commander that has moved over to Star Citizen completely. I have a feeling this video is going to be quite long, and so the TLDR here for anyone just wanting to know my conclusion is that for what I'm looking for in a space game and my main game overall, Star Citizen just fits my personal tastes and wants better. I want to add this as a disclaimer right from the get-go though, because of the high emotion this subject tends to elicit. People have different likes and priorities, right? Will, my husband, loves the Souls games. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and so on. I tried them and I really didn't like them. The way the game introduces you with no story whatsoever, no context, I just didn't feel any motivation to get into it. But Will absolutely loves those games. Likewise, within this video, the unavoidable question will be raised: do you think Star Citizen is a better game than Elite? And the answer is yes. For me, personally, it is. If you hear that opinion and think the rest of this video might make you unhappy, hopefully this will be enough for you to click away now. But this is how preferences work. People like different things. If you like Elite and want to keep playing it, then do that. Play the games you enjoy. But for me, that game is Star Citizen. So when I started playing Star Citizen, it was just after 3.13 launched, and the Odyssey expansion for Elite had been, for me, extremely underwhelming. Most disappointing for me of it was not even the performance, it was just that Frontier were never going to move away from grind mechanics. And they introduced yet more of these illogical alternate currencies in the form of another material grind. So because of my dissatisfaction here, I was open to trying other games, and Kaizen recommended that I give Star Citizen a go. So what were my expectations going in? Well, I was expecting very limited gameplay. In the Elite Dangerous community, especially on the Frontier forums, mention of Star Citizen is regarded as kind of a joke. If anyone suggests it as a game to try, they are derided as foolish or shilling for CIG. The forum community regards Star Citizen as a tech demo and vehemently oppose its funding model. I have my own reservations about the funding model, and I'll cover those later when I talk about my criticisms in general. But ultimately, within a significant portion of the Elite Dangerous community, Star Citizen is just seen as a scam. I was also expecting poor performance. My system is extremely limited and still is now. I'm relatively poor and so I cannot afford much in the way of meaningful upgrades. I was able to make a modest upgrade going in, but nonetheless I expected the performance to be worse than Elite by a considerable margin. I was also expecting a lot of bugs. Again, within the Elite Dangerous forum community, you hear derision aimed at Star Citizen whenever it is mentioned for the frequency of its bugs, and so going in, I was expecting a great deal of bugs too. There are kind of supercut videos online that present a compilation of bugs and imply that the entire game is basically just bugs, that it is a constant problem that is always present, and so that was something that, I was expecting going in. I was also expecting it to be very difficult to get new ships and equipment, so based on the reputation of CIG's funding model for the game, I expected it to be a very, very difficult task to get hold of different ships and equipment in the game. But I was also expecting it to look really, really great. Much, much more so than Elite. In a lot of ways, I was expecting it to play out like Elite. In Elite Dangerous, you are your ship, essentially. Yeah, I know you can technically leave your ship on planets and in stations, but the way this plays out are two basically separate experiences. And while in space, you are the ship you are flying, in all practical senses. You can only fly your own ships, and every ship is optimized for use by a single pilot. There is multi-crew to a limited degree, but the progression in the game is the ships and engineered ships. Because you cannot fly someone else's ship, or let them fly yours, you yourself must carry out all of the work involved in upgrading everything yourself. You cannot trade materials with other players, so gathering those is also a solo experience for the most part. Every ship can be equipped to carry out any of the game's loops, to a varying degree. No ships are truly specialised in the sense that they have a unique tool or ability that makes them suitable for one job only. They vary, yeah, but they all have the same HUD and same basic flight characteristics with a few values set differently. And coming into Star Citizen, this was the expectation regarding ships. But in Star Citizen, ships play out very differently. A ship is more like a tool. You can interact with them in many different ways while on board. You can have other players fly your ships or borrow ships from them. Ships in Star Citizen are also mostly all built with a specific role in mind, with tools and abilities that are built into the hull itself, not equipped to a hardpoint. Ships do have weapon hardpoints and missile ranks, of course, but a combat ship cannot be outfitted for mining, for example. Multi-crew ships, especially the bigger ones, require a crew to be effective at all. On the most formidable of the large combat ships, for example, none of the weapons are controlled by the pilot and instead fall to turret gunners. After playing for 4 months or so, I now find the often charged criticism that the game is pay to win to be misplaced. Ships don't play out the same way they do in Elite. Ships are specialised for the role they are designed for, so if you want to take on something big and expensive like a hammerhead, you go with a torpedo bomber, like a Gladiator or an Eclipse. Want to dogfight with other fighters? An Arrow, Gladius or Sabre is what you want. Player skill is much more of a deciding factor here for sure. Larger ships are a lot more credits than smaller ships, and so would take longer to earn in-game, and therefore having access to a hammerhead from the get-go is a useful advantage, provided you want to do multi-crew gameplay and have a crew of 7 available. With a crew of 7, the hammerhead is a formidable killing machine, and so having access to these expensive ships from the outset is a useful tool, but they need a crew. They cannot be used solo. You won't get much of anything done without one, and committing 7 players to a hammerhead against 7 smaller individual ships, especially if those ships, like I said, are torpedo bombers, where a single torpedo could take out that hammerhead. The guarantee of victory, or the pay to win aspect as it is often referred to, is no guarantee. Smaller combat ships are also a lot faster, so quick to get out of trouble, and easier to maneuver among asteroids and in atmosphere. 2 locations where a lot of combat happens. It really comes down to your choice of ship more than anything, and that is based on what activity you want to go for, or what kind of targets you want to take on. Single player ships like the Eclipse stealth bomber are amazing at taking on larger ships like hammerheads. Its torpedoes are extremely dangerous to large ships, with one-shot kills possible. But it is lightly armed in terms of weapons, so wouldn't stand much of a chance against smaller, cheaper fighters. Ships have a very granular damage model too, with parts of the ship able to be blown clean off. Take out a single maneuvering thruster on a ship like the Cartual or Hawk, and they will lose a lot of their controllability. Take out a wing, and you may have blown away half of your opponent's weapons at the same time. Shields are not so over the top in Star Citizen as they are in Elite either. There are no cell banks or ways to instantly restore them, and distortion weapons are specifically there to very quickly strip away shields and interrupt ship systems, with the drawback that they don't actually cause any real damage. Larger ships have shield facings, so each side of the ship has its own individual shield, and this adds a lot of strategy to taking them on, where it's better to focus on one specific siding of the ship to wear down the shields there completely. And then for the defender, obviously, they are trying to face a still very strong side of the shield towards the attacker. Combat leans very much more towards skill than just wearing down never-ending shields. A result of this is that combat can be very quick. I think the best way to describe the way combat ships play out in Star Citizen is that the hierarchy of capabilities is circular, like rock, paper, scissors, with a ship being very good against one class of ship but extremely vulnerable against another class of ship, and ships of a similar class are generally well matched. So that's ships covered. Let's talk about the good aspects of the game. What do I really like about Star Citizen? People often ask me if I'm ever going back to Elite, and my honest answer to that question is, how could I? I'm going to give my opinion here, and I do so not to criticise either game, but simply to explain my feeling. If you enjoy Elite still, that is awesome, and I encourage you to keep playing. Everyone should play the games they enjoy, but I get asked this question so much and I need to answer it truthfully, even if that may rub some people up the wrong way. To me, after so long in Star Citizen now, and even with the graphical changes to Elite, it feels in comparison to Star Citizen like a toy version of a space game, if that makes sense. Like a stripped down, lesser version. I know there will be Elite players watching this right now already typing comments saying things like, how can Elite be the stripped down game in this comparison? Star Citizen only has a single star system. Right, well, the thing is, the Stanton system has far more character, and genuinely memorable, unique locations than I ever remember encountering in Elite. 400 billion stars is great, but there's nothing out there, not in a true or unique interaction sense. In pragmatic terms, it is size for the sake of size. When coming to Star Citizen from Elite, there is almost an overwhelming level of detail. I am not exaggerating to say that every frame could be a screenshot. A single system, in the same way the actual solar system is a single system, there's a lot of real estate to explore in a single system when it's done to this level of detail. There are 4 planets in the Stanton system, each with 3 or 4 moons and 5 Lagrange points. The Lagrange points have Lagrange clouds like small nebulae, asteroids, and usually a station or 2. And every one of these locations has its own unique identity. Stations and cities are extremely unique and interactive. There are examples in the system of every biome you can think of, and then a few extra too. I mean, with weather, oceans, thick vegetation. The main planets here are not barren, rocky or icy masses with tenuous atmospheres, and occasionally a small sprout of some odd looking life. These are full, rich worlds with aerodynamic effects on your ship like wind, weather like rain and snow, high winds, hills, mountains, forests, tundra, dusts and sandstorms, a gas giant you can fly through, and a city in the clouds. I mentioned that within Stanton are examples of all biomes. Well, that's because this is like a testbed for future systems. The planet tech is there and working, but more systems are soon to be with us because the underlying tech to make it happen is mostly there. The level of interaction is also really quite amazing with ships too. Obviously the big selling point is that you can get up and walk around the interior, as can anyone in your crew, even while the ship is in motion. But it's hard to fully explain just how much this impacts the experience of the game, and how much of a connection you can develop with your ship as a result. In Star Citizen, you are not your ship. Your ship is a tool and an environment. You can keep things in it, load it up with cargo by hand, park vehicles in it, sometimes even make use of your own smaller hangar aboard. Turrets must be travelled to and entered. You can stand in the open doors of a ship like the Cutlass as it descends through the atmosphere, or board a distressed ship to clear it of hostile invaders. Even with one-seat ships, if they have an interior, you can carry as many people as you can physically fit in the space. I will admit that the level of interaction was even a bit overwhelming when starting out. The ship's multifunction displays are a good example. You wonder initially how you're going to learn and read all of the different displays and interact with them, because you're so used to staring at Elite's basic holographic HUD. Every vehicle has a different MFD layout, and every ship manufacturer has a different colour scheme and ship voice style. But the amazing thing is you do learn them all, and how to use them and interact with them. You can set them up any way you want, having different displays on each screen. And since 3.14, any of the immediate information you need for combat is mostly on the HUD now. But it's still useful to have certain displays up in front of you, like your power triangle. The world of Star Citizen is incredibly interactive, and a lot of that interactivity is very intuitive. You can buy food and drink, sit in seats on public transport, elevators have many different floors to get off, objects can be picked up and carried or stowed in a backpack, objects placed on your ship are persistent provided you dock the ship back at the station when done. At major cities you can make use of mass transit to move between districts, and everything is really well signposted. Like, the environments can be learned, of course, but visiting a new place and following the signs and maps to where you need to be is very cool. The locations are all incredibly varied too. Stations are fully fleshed out, not just a single room concourse. There is a habitation suite, like a hotel kind of deal, and shops, a galleria floor with a bar and food court usually, lots of different stores to buy things. Some stations have a shipping deck where you can pick up cargo or rent ships. Others have a refinery for processing ore into profitable cargo. Every location has its very distinct identity. Interaction with other players is really well managed for the most part too. There's quite a robust crime system in place to manage the way combat occurs between players, at least in the Stanton system, while under the cover of an active comm array. Generally speaking, most combat between players will be bounty hunters and wanted players. You can use in-game voice to immediately speak locally with anyone in earshot, and even use face tracking via webcam to animate your character's face, if you have the setup for it. When I first started playing, I was of the mindset to kill anybody nearby because they were a potential threat. This is kind of behaviour learned from DayZ and games like that, I guess. But using in-game voice comms to chat with other players, especially in potentially tense situations, like if you are going to clear your crime stat and there is another player there, you can communicate with them and let them know that you are not there to kill them, and maybe you can even help each other out. So as I said, within the Stanton system there is a pretty robust system in place to govern player interactions. Let's say someone decides to start ganking people. They go after someone weaker than them and blow them up. The ganker now has a crime stat level 3, which means there is an actual bounty out for them other players can collect on, and players will come. While a ganker has a crime stat, they cannot visit most stations or cities, relying mainly on Grim Hex over Yella. So their movements can be a little bit predictable if they're trying to continue their killing spree, or they can go and try and clear their crime stat at a security post. This takes time and carries additional risk because another mission for players is generated to take out intruders at the security post. Time spent here is time not spent killing other players. If they are killed, they go to prison. And prison is also a really cool mechanic in my opinion because it still gives you options that are pretty fun. If you have a 12-hour sentence, say, you could just log off and in 12 hours time come back to be released. Or you could head down to the prison mines and mine some ore to reduce your sentence. You can get it down really quickly when you know what you are looking for. Or you can even escape through an elaborate and moderately difficult escape route. This requires support from outside to be picked up afterwards, and you still have to go to a security post to clear your name, while also not having access to your usual items. Prison is enough of a hassle or time sink to detract from repeated griefing, but not such an obstacle as to keep you out of the game for too long. When it comes to on-foot combat, the feeling is one of realism really. A single bullet can sometimes kill you. You gotta think armour, more so than Odyssey. There are no personal shields here or bullet sponge targets. Using actual tactics matters because the time to kill is very short. You see in Odyssey, there's really no need for actual infantry tactics because you always have plenty of time. If you round a corner and there are a bunch of enemy there, you've got plenty of time to get back into cover. When the time to kill is realistically low, you really have to rely on other people in your team to not end up dead very quickly. There is a real sense of integration between on-foot, ground vehicle and aerial combat here as well, provided you are going up against other players at least. We'll talk about that more in the next section, the criticisms, but I will say that the weapons all feel punchy and there is no engineering grind. You just buy things. Personal equipment like weapons and armour is also very cheap, and you can hot swap weapon attachments on the fly. Dropped in with a long range scope, but now you're entering a cave, swap out the scope for a red dot sight. Weapons feel disposable, like items, and they kind of have to be, as you lose it if you are killed. Heading into a bunker after a wanted player or hiding in a very exposed security room at Security Post Korea while clearing your own crime stat is extremely tense because death can be but a moment away. And perhaps the most important positive for me in the game is that it feels like the vision of what CIG are doing is intact. They have a vision, a goal, and all the new additions are building towards something. Now, I want to give an unbiased, honest review here, and there are a lot of criticisms to match the benefits. Star Citizen is still in alpha, a point of derision and I guess not entirely unwarranted due to its development time, and you have to go into the game knowing that and what it means. And Star Citizen players, this is your turn to stow your commenting fingers. Hopefully the Elite Dangerous players were willing to reserve judgment, so you guys should too. The funding model. It is a tough one, I will admit, but for me it does come in as a criticism. Like, I get it, it is what allows CIG the freedom to pursue this vision without compromise and to commit to such a long-term project. I really do understand that this is one of the only ways they could do this, but I can still also see why it draws so much criticism from outsiders. How crazy it looks to see the insane prices on a lot of the ships. You can buy the ships in-game with credits earned from playing, so you're not locked out by the ship sale or I guess pledge system, which, let's be honest, functionally you are buying a ship. You're paying money, you're getting a ship in return. They call it a pledge, but you are buying a ship. That's functionally what is occurring there. Ships earned in-game get lost if there is a wipe, which is about to occur actually on the release of the next patch, for example. And so to have access to your preferred ship permanently, the available option is to pledge for it. My own personal criticism of this really is that not all ships are available on the pledge store. You see, you can upgrade ships, essentially using the value of the ship you already own towards a ship of greater value. And this could be a way for people to kind of gradually move from one hull to another at their own pace, putting in say $20 each month or something for an upgrade to the ship they want, for example, supporting the project as they go. But instead, the system in place is to have kind of flash sales of specific ships throughout the year, and then a big sale in November of a lot of the ships. And this last big sale, by the way, is very poorly communicated too. As a new player, I was completely unaware that there would be a time in the year when more ships would be available. I'm having to find out in passing from another player. I have pledged for ships myself, so I've made use of this system, but still, it doesn't quite sit right, and I can't quite verbalise why. Then we have the bugs, and they are real. They do happen, not uncommonly. but they're also not overbearing. The majority of the bugs are just small oddities, like opening an elevator door before the environment is fully loaded in, to be met with a black void, or shutting off your quantum drive only to have it pop back on again. But yes, the bigger bugs also occur. Random deaths, missing items and weapons when logging in sometimes, logging out in certain conditions can lead to an infinite loading screen when logging back in, requiring some easy but still annoying workarounds to get back into game. Disconnections occur usually sparingly, but during times like right after the release of a new version, they can be very, very common. Some extreme cases of bugs like infinite loading screen or missing ships requires a character reset, which isn't as drastic as it sounds, requiring you to just remake your avatar and rebuy weapon magazines mostly. But you do lose all your bounty hunter certifications, so you've got to redo them all, including the PvP one. I think bugs like grind are a thing that people have varying tolerances for. I have an okay tolerance for bugs, for example, provided they are not game breaking or super frustrating, but an extremely low tolerance for grind. The bugs in the game are nowhere near the level to really hinder the experience, but if you have a low tolerance for bugs, they will probably be enough to infuriate you. PvE content in the game right now is also very limited, especially on foot. If you don't have a good group to play with to organise your own kind of events, the PvE side of things is quite limited in certain aspects, especially, as I said, on foot. AI pathfinding on the planet's surfaces is not yet ready to be in the game, and so you will only encounter enemy AI in bunkers, caves, on ships and stations. And maybe the most important consideration for this is that AI performance is heavily dependent on the server performance in its current state. Generally speaking, I'm just going to say it, the average AI performance is really, really bad. Like, terrible reaction times and activity. It can be as bad as no response at all from enemy AI on foot. If you're on a really new server or a server with a very low population of players, then wow, you can have some amazingly cool firefights and the AI behaviour seems really good. But this is far from a guarantee, and on average I have to say that the AI across the board with the current server performance is bad. There are big server changes being worked on, the now mythical server meshing set to be implemented at some point in the future, and that will greatly improve performance. But as of right now, this is something you should be aware of. Ship-based AI is generally a lot better, but still suffers from varying degrees of hindrance based on server performance. And one other thing, especially if you do have a large group, is that there is a general lack of content for larger, more coordinated groups right now as well. What I mean by that is, if you have a group of several big multi-crew ships, like a couple of hammerheads or a mix of carracks and hammerheads, you're going to find even the toughest bounty missions very, very easy. There is a single mission available at the end of a specific mission chain to take on an Idris, and I feel like we need more of this kind of challenge for when we have 2 or 3 big multi-crew combat ships together and are looking to go out and take something on. The dynamic events like Xenothreat and Ninetales Lockdown are amazing for this, I will admit. Big coordination plays out really, really well there. But day to day, you will have plenty to do in a single crew in a Carrack or Hammerhead, but put 2 of them together and the challenge is a bit lacking. If you look back through the Elite Commander Plays Star Citizen playlist I have released on this channel, you will see a wide range of adventures that occurred both as part of the actual in-game mission chains and organically with friends. There is definitely more content to add in terms of more complex missions that scale to accommodate larger player groups, but there is another aspect of Star Citizen that was both a surprise to me coming from Elite and an amazing tool to have at your disposal. Star Citizen fully embraces emergent gameplay between players, giving tools like player-to-player credit transfer and the ability to just give items away to other people. This tiny difference in attitude towards players by the developer opens up a huge amount of scope for players to set up their own scenarios, objectives, engage in business deals of various kinds, and so on. Embracing emergent gameplay is a smart decision in my opinion, because it allows players to create content that the developer didn't have to spend development resources on. And because of this design philosophy, for organised player groups there is a wide range of activities and scenarios you can play out. Of course, the prescribed content, missions and player tools are always growing. Patches are released quarterly, containing new content, gameplay changes and so on. There is a tangible sense of progress being made, albeit at a very slow rate for some of the major milestones. I think Star Citizen is one of those eye of the beholder situations. For me, it is all of the games I loved the most rolled into one, like Elite and Arma. It is more immersive for me on a monitor than Elite was in VR, and the adventures we've had and continue to have are just outstanding every time. The wow factor of the planets, sunsets, cities never gets old. But for many, the limited prescribed content, the frequent bugs, and the funding model will be enough to convince them to never give the game a try. I would highly recommend it, and of course if you use my referral code in the description that would also be nice, though by no means a necessity to play the game. But I recommend it with the caveat that you are aware going in that this is not a complete product yet, and bugs should be expected. If you do start playing though, join an org or a community. The game is infinitely better with a group, as was Elite actually, but there are so many players out there willing to play a space MMO, but unwilling to embrace the multiplayer community aspect of it. You can play solo, sure, but I promise you will enjoy things more with a group, and you'll make new friends along the way too. I have played Star Citizen for 4 months now, and I have no intention to stop. Thank you for watching everyone, and I'd like to send out a very special thank you to my amazing patrons that you can see on screen now. My patrons are the reason videos on this channel are possible. You guys are awesome, and I love all of you. We'll be back with some more adventures aboard the Greg Burton very soon, guys. Fly safe, everyone.